Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Barakatah Yahweh, Bashim Yakshai, Bashim Rakakadash. All praise unto Yahweh, Bashim Yahshai, Bashim Yakakadash. Double honors unto the apostles of Great Millstone. Honest you brothers that be pushing this truth in sincerity throughout the four corners of the earth. So this is going to be a video going into the current state of the economy. And basically, I've been doing videos like this for a little while about the 2008 crash and how the system that you had before it, basically the reasons why you had the 2008 crash in the first place. You know, you basically got the same thing happening right now, and you got it happening worse. Okay, so I'm gonna read through this. I'm gonna add some bits to it. I'm not no economist. I'm just doing my best, okay, to push this word, okay, which is of Yahweh Shem Yahushai. And part of this word is keeping a watchful eye on things that are out there. We know from the book of Revelations, the 13th chapter, the 16th verse, that there's going to be a mark of the beast, okay? And in order for that mark of the beast to be set up, which is going to be the new system of executing financial transactions, for that to be set up, well, pretty much you're going to have the existing system taken down, so to speak, okay, or replaced or crashed, okay? So without much further ado, I'm going to get into this article. It says, no lesson learned. Next financial crash to be worse than US dollar crash, okay? It says a decade after, and remember this thing happened, this popped up in 2008. It's 2018 now, all right? More specifically, September 2018. We just had the anniversary of 9/11 not too long ago. So it says, no lesson learned. The next financial crash to be worse than the US dollar collapse, okay? Now let's read that again. It says it's going to be worse than the US dollar collapse, because remember what? Because all of those liabilities that they had, all that they was liable to pay back, all right, back in the day in 2008, a lot of those debts ain't being paid, okay? A lot of those debts have been paid, okay? What you had a situation where the market basically was stagnating or circling the drain, so to speak, and they did some financial trickery to have it where it looked like things were starting to pick up again. So you had quantitative easing, QE1, QE2, QE3 out here in Britain. Okay, you had the Federal Reserve basically have the interest rates very, very, very low, which had it to where businesses started up and so on and so forth. All right, and it looked like things were going better, but really the hole that was being dug was getting deeper and deeper and deeper. Okay, so it says a decade after the global financial crisis, the world is facing another crash even bigger than the one in 2008. Okay, veteran stockbroker Pete Schiff, CEO of Euro Pacific Capital, okay, too big to fail banks both are now both bigger than ever, more exposed than ever to rising rates and recessions. And remember what I just said. No, I just mentioned that the Federal Reserve has had that interest rates very low, which had allowed businesses to expand because they get those loans from the banks, right? Now you got a situation right now where that rate's getting ready to be moved back up. You can't have it, next to zero forever and ever. Like out here in Britain, I know I believe it was a couple of months ago, maybe early on in the year. Basically, you had to have it to where what? The Bank of England raised those interest rates up, and I believe the same thing happened out there within the United States. But what that does is that slows down the markets, man. All right, so here it is. They did the so-called fix to it by reducing the rates, but the same thing that they're gonna have to revert back to make it normal again is going to crash. Make it it's going to be it's going to make it worse. Okay, so it says exposing. So it says more and more exposed than ever to rising rates and recessions. Okay, so the systematic risk to the economies are greater than they were in 2008. Such a bank should have been allowed to fail a decade ago, because the system, how they were set up in the first place, the infrastructure, so to speak, was already jacked up. Okay, such banks should have been allowed to fail a decade ago, he says. It says the moral hazard associated with the government having made the mistake of bailing out the banks, and that's what happened. The government bailed out the banks, all right, and then the banks they're back doing the same thing right now. All right, because it's a setup. Okay, ultimately it's a setup because there's a transition happening from what's known as currency into digital currency. All right, where you're gonna have the RFID chip and a very stringent means of moving, man. Okay, so it says so continuing, it says the moral hazard associated with the government having made the mistake of bailing out the banks that should have been allowed to fail. Unfortunately, no lessons were learned from the last crisis. We repeated and expanded all the mistakes that caused the last crisis, ensuring the next one will be much worse. Okay, so they did the same mistakes that they made before. They did them, but they did them even bigger this time. According to the investors, all the problems of 2008 financial crisis loom even larger now. Even the even worse monetary and fiscal policy since the last crisis guarantees that the next one will be much worse. The crisis will be similar in that the government will be the cause. Everyone will be caught by surprise, and the capitalists will be it will be the scapegoats, and it will be much different in that it will be much worse. It says, however, the nature of the next crisis will be different. While the 2008 was centered around the mortgage date, the dollar rise, and gold fall, the new one will be about the U.S. Treasury debt crisis. The Treasury debt will be the focal point of the next crisis, and the dollar will collapse and gold will soar. Okay, and, if you got money, you might want to invest in some gold because, this is going to be much worse. It says ensuring that the recession will be much worse, and consumers will also consumer prices will also rise sharply, man. So that's what's coming up, man. Okay, that's what the future is holding, and we've been saying this for a long time here at Great Millstone. So hopefully with that was a verification. With that, I'm going to say all praise unto Yahweh, Shemi Ashai, Wahara Kakadash. Double honors unto the apostles of Great Millstone. Honest you brothers that be pushing this truth in sincerity. Shalom.